is the head of culture and wellbeing at Mental Health First Aiders, or Mental Health First Aid England. I beg your pardon. They want a society where everyone can thrive, and their organisation believes that zero stigma surrounding mental health is important, and they want mental health to be openly discussed and supported. And I think they've already made a big impact in that area. Their mission is that mental health should be treated just like physical health, and to train 1 in 10 people in mental health awareness and skills. She's a valiant cultural builder whose specialism spans across people experience, workplace culture, diversity, inclusion, mental health and well-being, as well as corporate responsibility. So Ama, welcome. Please unmute yourself. Our first question for you is, as a recognised expert organisation on mental health, what impact has recent events had on ethnic minority employees in the workplace?
Hi Raj, thanks for having me again today. And I think just listening to some of the sessions beforehand, and Carl, I think everything you're talking about accountability is spot on. And I think, you know, we actually ran a couple of webinars recently, last month, in fact 3, where we talked about supporting Black people and people of colour in the workplace, but also becoming an anti-racism. And we ran some polls, and what came out of those polls were 95% of people definitely agreed that racism and dealing with the effects of racism significantly has a negative impact on mental health of people of colour and Black people. And when you think about recent events such as the killing of George Floyd, as well as individual experiences, it can really impact their work performance as well. You know, and I think what is really important is that workplaces and colleagues within those workplaces and leaders need to really understand that for many Black people and people of colour, they are still subjected to, we mentioned microaggressions in the chat box, you know, microaggressions in the workplace, discrimination of different kinds. I mean, the research is there, I don't need to kind of go over it. But, you know, I think the key thing is to need to be aware that we need to create we need to create psychological safe spaces. And that is not happening in workplaces at the moment. So when you think about the compounding issues that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and you look at it through the lens of racism, white privilege and everything else, you know, people of colour and Black people are predominantly subjected to it more worse than any other, most predominantly other groups, as well as, you know, other diverse groups too. So I think it's really important to just emphasise that we need to take action now. Because fundamentally, if we don't recognise, and actually when you look at the mental health and wellbeing space, the narrative is always talked about by the majority group and not necessarily the groups that are from diverse or marginalised backgrounds. And that narrative needs to change.
So what are some of the challenges that ethnic minority colleagues or people who've used your service or in your senior network have shared around their lived experience when they've raised concerns about race equality in their organisation? Because there seems to be so much pressure on race equality network chairs to create miracles at the moment for corporates.
Yeah, and I talked about and I briefly mentioned psychological safety, but I think that's one of the challenges. It's like, you know, it's a fear of compromising that safety for those individuals, and also an expectation for them to have all the answers. There's always an onus for people of colour or Black people or people from diverse backgrounds in organisations to solve the problems for those organisations. And that is actually the wrong way to look at it. You know, if they are sharing, and especially if they are sharing, you know, their lived experience, they are fearful that it might hinder the opportunities to progress in the workplace. It's been seen. It's actually, you know, when you've read research and seen the surveys, 33% of Black employees feel that, you know, their ethnicity is a barrier to their next career move, compared to 1% of white employees. So just imagining that in mind, that we already have this fear of actually, well, because of the colour of my skin, I face a barrier in sort of my career. So then to want to reach out or talk out about it and speak my lived experience, why would I want to do that? Especially if I, you know, when I mean I'm talking for the masses, not just myself, but in terms of when you look at the challenges from ethnically diverse people, you know, there's also that fear of being penalized in other ways, such as having negative labels, you know, comments associated with what they're trying to share, you know, comments like angry, aggressive, or even playing the race card. I mean, how often or how many times have we heard that in the workplace? Which is quite ironic, because why would you want to play a card that obviously has and has shown detrimental negative impact? If you do, it makes no sense. Some 6.5 employees feel that they can't be or bring their whole selves to work or their real selves to work. And some of them actually think, 43% think that the employees don't even know them, because every day they have to cover who they really are and have to think about multiple facets just to fit into an organization. So I think it's really important. And the bottom line here is that, the majority of people of color, Black people, ethnic diverse employees don't feel that they can be themselves at work, because their experiences are often gaslit, portrayed as overreacting, not acknowledged or validated. And to have to constantly be fighting for that, it obviously would impact your mental health and well-being in a negative way, because you're not getting the support that you need, and you're not even being valued for that perspective. And this can no longer go on. It's not acceptable.
The answer to that question is as fantastic and out of this world as your screensaver or your screen background. So many positive remarks on the chat for this. So you've been involved with and been material in the creation of safe space. What do you think will be different for organisations participating in the Safe Space initiative, and how will it be good for ethnic minority colleagues and maybe even have a serious impact on the racial equality in the workplace?
Well, I think employees need to recognise the intersection between race and mental health. Not to do so can be very harmful for both the individual and the organisation. I mean, we've referenced several reports today, several charters, etc. But there's lots of evidence out there that say when you have diversity, inclusion, mental health, and when they are prioritised in organisations, you generally tend to have happier, healthier, and more productive workforce and environments. So I think the key thing here, again, is leaders and staff at all levels must educate themselves around race, racism, and racial justice, and also the mental and emotional impacts that actually, as I say, have the effect on people of color and Black people and other diverse backgrounds. We talked about accountability, or should I say, Carl talked about accountability, but it's also the responsibility of white colleagues and managers to understand what systemic racism really means and prioritize anti-racist principles. And it's actually quite interesting that we talk about white privilege, because I think when people hear that word, or should I say majority of white people, and I'm saying this because I've had several conversations and done some training around mental health and well-being in terms of relation to race, the default to think about white privilege is that they think about wealth and class, when actually you need to think about it from a perspective of power and influence. There is some slight, there's definitely some resonating barriers between class and wealth. But when we're talking about white privilege here, we're talking predominantly about power and influence that favors a majority group. So, I think the lived experiences of people of color, Black people, and, ethnic diverse people it is traumatizing. It's painful, it's isolating, and it's abundantly frustrating in ways that, cannot be imagined. So I think creating the safe space, and one of the reasons why when we approached this, I think creating safe spaces for Black people and people of color is really important. And also when you create those spaces, to make sure that when the shared experience is shared, that something is done to improve the workplace culture and environment. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. When you support the creation of brave spaces to talk, for people of color to talk, where they don't have to worry about the psychological safety of how they'll be judged and perceived after, that can only improve the workplace culture. And, I think it's quite critical to understand that kind of going back to that link of mental health and well-being, that's what happens. And also I think what happens is it should go outside of these safe spaces. So the safe spaces that we start off with, to actually make sure the environments for people to talk freely in, we need to then take it out into the ecosystem of what I call the culture of the workplace. Otherwise, what happens is it stays in those small spaces and people are still subjected to the way that they have been subjected and nothing changes. But if you do it properly, it can drive transformation in the workplace.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like about the this Safe Space program is it's so carefully curated, so that it's structured and it provides more than just an opportunity for table tennis view of, you know, yes we did, no we didn't, etc. It's really quite progressive. And then if you take those results and you bring them up by industry, you can really look at the priorities for change industry by industry. And I think that's just a really powerful national tool. Final question, a one-liner if you may. How can Mental Aid First Aid England help organisations and employees and their mental health? There's your elevator pitch. You've got a captive.
Oh my God, one sentence. It's going to be hard. But, you know, I think what I want to actually do, what I do want to say to our audience is that we are Mental Health First Aid. We have made a commitment. We're on a journey. We know we need to do things differently. And we are looking to do that. We've started to do that. But I think, you know, we advocate a whole organization approach to well-being. So creating that safe space, healthy workplace where mental and physical health of employees are valued equally. And the only way that that could be done is to acknowledge, value, and provide open spaces as well as safe spaces for your employees to truly thrive. And in order for that to happen, they need to feel that they can opt in rather than do the opting out, which everyone's doing majority of the time, to be wanting to be part of that workplace culture and to make that change. So that's pretty much what, I guess in a nutshell, we're trying to do. We've launched, this is more like more than three sentences, but we have recently launched a guide around supporting the well-being and mental health of people of colour and Black people in the workplace, which I'll share the link in a minute. But that's one of the ways we're looking to help, and you know, organisations transform into being actively anti-racist.